Hello, everyone. Coming to you from the top of the podcast before the intro video on the entire podcast because I just recorded this entire episode with Troy Finnegan from ClutchPoints, which you will hear after this quick intro from me here. But I'm Tyler King, host of Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 77, which you'll hear me say again shortly. But right after we finish recording this episode, breaking down the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, Utah State coach Jack Calhoun is leaving to go take the job at Cincinnati, his alma mater. Not unexpected, but I did mention during the podcast that I hadn't heard anything yet about Jared Calhoun, but now it is clear that he is leaving. We found that out. I got the notification about 10 minutes after we finished recording this episode here on Monday afternoon. So apologies for that. So disregard anything you hear about Jared Calhoun staying or going because he is leaving for Cincinnati. Not unexpected. He is going to be in the Big 12 next year. And I think he'll do a great job there. And now Utah State is back searching for another coach again. They at least got this guy to stay for 2 years, which is a win for the Aggies. But we'll talk about that Arizona game and the loss that ended the Utah State season yesterday in San Diego as well. We'll talk obviously more about Utah State as hopefully later this week, and as we learn more about who's going to be interested in this job and what kind of potential names to monitor. Other news that we did not cover on this podcast because it happened 2 minutes after the Jack Calhoun news, after we started recording the first time, was Arizona State is hiring Randy Bennett, St. Mary's coach. Randy Bennett is making the move to Tempe. Longtime coach at St. Mary's, has done a great job building that program up, getting into multiple NCAA tournament appearances this year. They had a disappointing first-round exit this time around against Texas A&M, but Randy Bennett is a very interesting hire for Arizona State. We're going to break that down more in depth later, if not this week, the following week on the podcast, because we've got a lot to get to this week still with Arizona heading to the Sweet 16, which we'll talk a bunch about on today's episode. So appreciate everyone for bearing with me as we got a little breaking news after recording the podcast. So here is the rest of the podcast that I'd already previously recorded with Troy Finnegan from ClutchPoints.
Got the last 7-2 for Arizona, and he comes around to get the handoff. Between the legs, Caleb Love. Oh! We've got the player of the year, Caleb Love, tonight.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 77. I'm your host, Tyler King, here as always to talk all things hoops in the Mountain Time Zone, and we are here to break down the first weekend of the NCAA Tournament, one of my favorite weekends of the year by far. Every time it comes around, you've got all the games going on Thursday and Friday. We had some really good second round games on Saturday and Sunday, and I've got three teams to talk. All three teams, obviously, that we had in action, we're going to hit today. The Arizona-Utah State matchup, as I predicted, came to fruition. We got that yesterday with Arizona winning 78-66 to advance to the Sweet 16. Once again, they're still chasing their first Elite Eight appearance since 2015 and their first Final Four since 2001. But Utah State bounces back with an NCAA tournament win after losing the first round last year. They beat Villanova on Friday in San Diego. That was a great game. We'll also hit BYU as well, who lost their first tournament game to Texas in Portland. Texas was coming off, winning in Dayton and then beat them as an 11 seed in Portland to advance. Texas beat Gonzaga too. In front of a pro Gonzaga crowd in Portland to advance to the Sweet 16. So got to a lot to break it down today. We'll preview the Arizona-Arkansas Sweet 16 game more in depth later this week. But to help me break down this first weekend of action is my good friend Troy Finnegan from ClutchPoints. Troy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It was a great weekend. Like you said, best weekend of the year, one of the best weekends. So enjoyed it. Excited to break it down a little bit.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I thought, a lot of people are talking throughout the weekend and especially last night about, no mid majors left heading into the Sweet 16 here. We have a couple higher seeds. One double-digit seed is Texas, as I mentioned. But Iowa as a 9 seed is in the Sweet 16 as well. If they're knocking off Florida, so. Even though there's no mid-majors left or kind of Cinderella darlings that the nation can get behind, second straight year with that, there's still some fun plucky underdogs, if you will, if you want to call Iowa and Texas a plucky underdog, with teams we didn't expect to make it this far. But we'll have to start with Arizona, Utah State. Obviously, it felt like for a while there that Arizona was going to blow out Utah State. They built an 18-point lead. I think a 51-33, in midway through the second half. But Utah State really kind of scratched and clawed their way back into it and made it a game. I think they got it pretty close. They never led in the game. Utah State, Arizona won wire to wire, but it made Tommy Lloyd on the Wildcats sweat a little bit. Just kind of what was your big takeaway from that one? Watching Arizona move on. I think obviously as expected, beating Utah State, but it was a fun game for two of my favorite teams that we talk about here on this podcast for sure.
Yeah, it was a great game to watch. It was like you said, it kind of felt like the entire time that the inevitable route was coming, and then they built the 18-point lead, and it was kind of like, all right, here we go. Just the sheer size of Arizona for the most part, just overwhelming what was a smaller Utah State team. But then I thought it was really cool to see, and it was cool to see for a Utah State team that a lot of people probably don't see a ton during the year, do what they do, run really good offense, take care of the basketball, scrap and claw on defense to get some stops, even when they're not rebounding the ball very well, and make a run to get back in the game. So it was really cool, I think, for them to showcase what made them such a good team this year and such a fun watch, to not only beat Villanova, but get back in this game. But in the end, that the size for Arizona, both inside and I think the positional size on the perimeter too, was just such a big factor. And again, Jaden Bradley at the end of these games is just ridiculous. He is just, every time Arizona needs a basket, he's right there and he comes through.
Yeah, it's his stat lines don't always look the prettiest. Like he had 18 points on 16 shots yesterday. He didn't take a ton of threes, only made one of them. Braden Burries always hits the clutch shot late. He was not really assertive at all offensively. Burries, he only took 7 shots in the game. Obviously, he was 3 of 3 from 3, which was huge. But like you said, they were just really kind of, especially early, feeding Koa Pete and Mo Krivas inside. They took, I think they got to the free throw line 39 times this game. Like you said, the size was just overwhelming from Arizona. And this is even a bigger Utah State team than they were last year, if you can believe that. Like they brought in Zach Keller, obviously, who's a local kid from the Denver area here. Gary Clark is like an undersized 5, but he's at least bigger than what they had last year. Carson Templin is always a guy that plays bigger than he actually is. And Elamine as a freshman certainly gave them a lot more size at the 4 than they had really at any point last season. Even if they're kind of undersized, like you said, at the guard spots with Falslev, Allen, and Collins all being, I think, 6'3" or 6'4" and under. But it was a really fascinating game. Like you said, it felt like you look at the stats, and even though like Arizona was not shooting the ball efficiently in the first half, they were able to build a 9-point lead going into the break, mostly because Koa Pete was awesome and they were getting to the line a ton, like I said. But you see the free throw disparity, you see the rebounding disparity, and it felt like a game Arizona was gonna blow, that Arizona should have won by double digits, or more than they did, I should say. They ended up winning by 12, obviously, but it's just really nice to see Utah State kind of show, like you said, what people don't get to see what a lot of people don't see all season, which is how they play. And I know you and I both enjoyed Utah State making Kevin Willard win a fire his staff. Game was one of the funnier moments of the first weekend. And
he was so convincing with it that the press wasn't sure that he was serious or not.
I'm still not sure if he wasn't. He might.
I'm still not either.
I'm still not sure if
he might wake up tomorrow and be like, "Oh."
Actually, I did mean that. Yeah, he's like, "Welcome to my life. It's a joke," and I was like, "Okay, that's not really convincing, Kevin." But even after the game, I've seen Kevin Willard post game after wins and Kevin post game after losses, and he's kind of the same guy. So just an interesting character to have in college basketball. But just kind of. We'll talk a little bit more about Arizona in a second and kind of what is going to come for them after obviously they destroyed Long Island in the first game, and they're able to get by Utah State to get to the Sweet 16, which everybody expected. I think this is the third straight year they're getting to the Sweet 16, fourth in 5 years under Tommy Lloyd. So this is kind of expected for this team, but Utah State in particular, them kind of winning a game, I think is really good step for the program. Now we'll see what happens with Jared Calhoun. It is Monday after a team loses in the NCAA Tournament. And it's kind of one of those things where I remember last year when I was in Seattle, I hadn't even made it home from the airport yet in the morning after the game. I had like a really early flight back, and Nico Medved had already left Colorado State for Minnesota. So as I'm recording this, Jared Calhoun is still the coach of Utah State, but obviously Cincinnati is going to come calling. we'll see about some other Power 4 jobs that come open or that are already open. So what do you make about kind of this run for Utah State here, that now they've won a couple tournament games, and it feels like, going into the Pac-12 next year, kind of regardless of who the coach is, like there's an infrastructure here for this to be the pretty clear number 2 program behind Gonzaga in this new look league, at least I think, maybe even ahead of San Diego State.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It was really impressive for them this year after, the Mountain West as a whole kind of fell off a little bit from where it had been in the last couple of years, but it was really nice and encouraging to see Utah State be able to kind of separate themselves as this is the best team in the Mountain West this year. The premier program, winning the regular season, winning the conference tournament, and to win a tournament game on top of that, which, as we know, has been a big sticking point for the Mountain West in recent years. It's kind of become a joke, a running joke in the last couple of years. So for them to be able to do this, give Arizona a good game. Obviously you have Gonzaga coming in, like you said, but I do think they're in a good spot, even if Calhoun does end up leaving, where they should be set up for sustained success in the Mountain West here.
Yeah, and they've got guys coming back like that they've already paid to keep around, like Falslev, like Carson Templin. They'll have to pay to keep their freshmen around that had good seasons. Like obviously mentioned Adlin Elamine, I think had a really, really good freshman season. I really like Elijah Perryman as well, the freshman guard that came off the bench. He should kind of slot right into the starting lineup where MJ Collins was for much of this season. Now, granted, they're going to have to go through the portal again, even if Calhoun sticks around, to kind of rebuild around the fringes of this roster and even find some supplemental pieces for the starting lineup, because outside of the guys I mentioned with Elamine, Falslev, Templin, and Perryman, the other guys, the other 5 rotation players that they've been relying on are seniors and will be gone. So there is that, but I think Utah State is shown that they're committed to winning throughout the last couple of years, regardless of who the coach is. And the administration there has done a good job finding kind of the next up-and-coming coach. I haven't really thought about who would be next for Utah State. I think that it would be an interesting conversation should the job come open, but don't want to speculate right now with nothing really imminent, it's seeming, with Calhoun, but we could get to that conversation at some point. But anything else you want to hit on Arizona from the opening weekend, or is it just kind of a lot of what you expected to see from this team so far as now they get ready to play John Calipari in Arkansas? Very interesting matchup, which we can talk about a little bit here, with obviously Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, the guards for Arkansas, Brazil as well as an interesting player. I love Billy Richmond. It's a fun Arkansas team for sure, but an interesting matchup, I think, as well for this Arizona team.
Yeah, from the first weekend, I think it was business as usual for Arizona. I do think it's good that Utah State was able to kind of test them as a team that has some really good guards and, make them sweat a little bit into the second half. But, moving on to the Sweet 16, you mentioned this Arkansas team is just a load of fun to watch. One of my favorite watches in the country this year. It's kind of a weird, like, non-Calipari. When you think of the really good John Calipari teams, this is not usually what they look like, but it's going to be a really interesting kind of contrast of styles with Arkansas's guards and, not really a lot of size, but just a really athletic, lanky team. And, Arizona will have that size advantage again, like they had against Utah State, but it's going to be a different caliber of athlete on the other side.
Yeah, I think the Acuff thing is going to be the thing everyone's talking about this week. Is obviously Acuff had 36 points in the win over High Point, did it efficiently as well. He was 11 of 22 from the field, made half his threes, got to the free throw line 13 times, had 6 assists. And just 2 turnovers. He's quickly rising up my draft board. We're going to talk about him, I think, a ton. You will definitely be on the show in the coming months as we get ready for the draft, because I think he's going to be such an interesting player to talk about. And another guy that I haven't really brought this up yet from a draft perspective, but Braden Berry's from Arizona. And I think this leads into the matchup a little bit, even though I think it'll be interesting to see what Tommy Lloyd does with his guards and kind of putting who on the perimeter. That I think is going to be a fascinating matchup perspective, because obviously you have Karchenkov on the wing as well, who has a size advantage and has been a really, really good defender for Arizona all year long. Like, who he guards will be interesting. But Acuff versus Berry's, not in just like them going against each other one-on-one in the game, but just like those two guys kind of both rising up draft boards at this point, I think is an interesting matchup to watch throughout, just looking at the whole of this game. Like, Acuff is a guy that he's going to give up points on the defensive end, but he's going to get them right back for you offensively. This is going to be like Arizona's defense, I think, has been the most underrated aspect of how good this team is all year long. Maybe it's not underrated because everyone loves Krivas, and Bradley obviously was Big 12 Player of the Year, partly because, or a large part because of how good he is defensively, but and who he guards in this game, I think is going to be interesting as well. But just kind of, what are your early thoughts a little bit on what Arkansas can do to maybe make Arizona sweat a little bit again, as they have been tested recently, like they were obviously that game against Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament was one of the best games of the season, came down the wire, last game-winning shot for Jaden Bradley, all of that. But it feels like this could be a game where Arkansas really, really makes this interesting from start to finish because of their guard talent.
Yeah, you mentioned Krivas. First of all, we shouldn't go talking about Arizona, Utah State without mentioning how awesome Krivas was in that game. He was
14 rebounds, monster. Man.
He was everywhere. But in this Arkansas game, it'll be interesting because Arkansas has basically no depth. So these guys are going to be out there the entire game. We'll see what happens with Pringle, but
they only played 6 guys in the second round against High Point. Like DJ Wagner played 22 minutes off the bench, but all 5 starters played at least 34 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of DJ Wagner going on in Arkansas land right now. We'll see if Pringle is back. I don't know what his status is going to be, but they're already missing Carter Knox.
Yeah.
But I think, Arkansas, they're going to score points, and they're going to play an up and down game, and they're going to get shots up. Thomas and Acuff are going to get a ton of shots up, and they're going to make shots probably no matter who is guarding them, especially from the perimeter. Both of them are just so good at getting to their spots, especially Acuff, getting shots up that they're comfortable with. And, Acuff, he makes so many contested shots. It's an incredible. I am curious to see Arizona. I do think can really bother him at the rim. He's not a huge guy, and he's kind of struggled a little bit at times finishing around the rim, especially against some of these bigger SEC teams. And Arizona does present one of those front lines with Krivas, like you said, Tobe Awaka, who didn't play a ton against Utah State, but he'll be a factor. Pete will be there inside. So I am curious I'm curious to see the amount of pressure that Arizona is willing to play with and say, hey, if we get beat, we've got these big guys at the rim. We're going to make you finish over us, or you can take tough twos. You can take these floaters, these mid-range shots. We'll live with that. So I do think the 2 guards are such good scorers, Thomas and Acuff, that you kind of have to give something up. I'm curious to see what Tommy Lloyd is willing to sort of concede a little bit, but I do think that it's going to be really tough for those guys at the rim against Arizona, especially with the shooting around them for Arkansas being kind of hot and cold at times.
Yeah, we'll talk about this game on the feed a little bit more in depth later this week. I think it's a really, really fascinating matchup. And one of the ones I'm more excited for. It's going to be a great Sweet 16 all around, I feel like. But we got to talk about BYU obviously as well. With them losing in the first round to a Texas team who, like I said, beat NC State in Dayton 2 days prior, then beats the BYU in Portland. Texas just happened to be the Dayton team that went on to win in the first round, and obviously went on to win in the second round as well over Gonzaga, which I didn't really see coming. But BYU loses 79-71. Dybantsa was pretty solid, like he has been, really kind of the his stretch to end the season, I think, has gone kind of underrated a little bit too, with how much he's actually visibly improved on the court. He's got 35 points and 10 rebounds in the game now, had a bunch of turnovers and some really bad ones, and wasn't really, Texas wasn't letting him or anybody on BYU really play make in any meaningful way. They had 6 assists to 7 turnovers as a team in the game. So 6 assists on 24 made buckets for BYU. So obviously, it's a weird year for BYU overall, with Richie Saunders going down in mid-February. That just kind of quickly evaporated the ceiling for this team. But I've got some thoughts about this BYU team as a whole and kind of what they can be going forward. But just kind of, what is your take on BYU and AJ Dybantsa's his run in college ending here in the first round?
Yeah, that game went about how Sean Miller expected, it sounded like, both during and after the game. They asked him if they could stop AJ Dybantsa. He said no. But I mean, it's kind of the theme with them kind of for most of the year since Saunders went down is like Dybantsa is going to get his, Rob Wright is going to get his. What are you getting from, the rest of these guys? And in the end, that really just wasn't enough. And Dybantsa, I mean, we'll talk a lot about Dybantsa as an individual player.
Yeah,
plenty coming up, but he improved a lot as a playmaker this year. But I don't think he's quite at the level as a playmaker where he was able to elevate the entire team to the point that it needed to continue.
He was trying at that time.
Yeah,
totally. It never got there. Yeah.
And it's really hard. He's in a tough spot because he's out there with Rob Wright and a bunch of guys who the other team is just not super concerned about. And, it's really hard for him to be learning on the fly, playing in really tight spaces like that. And you saw that in the Texas game, especially against a Texas team that on the other side, I mean, we talked about them a little bit before recording, where they've got a ton of good players. Like this is not some 11
a lot of older players as well.
They're not an 11 seed level team right now. They kind of, it was a new team. They took a long time to kind of, figure it out. But now they've got a lot of really good players and a good coach, and it's a really good experienced roster.
It kind of reminds me a lot of the Colorado team from 2 years ago.
That's a good call.
And they also won in Dayton, beat Florida in that epic game at Indy, and then lost a really close one to Marquette in the second round, where that could have been a Sweet 16 game easily with how well CU was playing at that point of the season. With they had 3 NBA players and a couple other high quality college players on that team as well.
Yeah, that's a great call. So I do think that BYU got a little bit of a tough draw, and obviously the Saunders injury, especially for the way that this BYU team was built, where you're primarily relying on 3 players offensively for most of what you're doing. When 3 becomes 2, you just become so much easier to guard, even if Dybantsa is just an incredible scorer and an incredible shot maker. It just ended up being too much for Kevin Young and those guys.
Yeah, and obviously Kebekeda was in foul trouble for a lot of that game. Like he only played 24 minutes. Like I think that would have been ideally above 30 if he wasn't in foul trouble. And they just did not really have the size BYU did off the bench. I mean, they brought in obviously Abdullah Ahmed from the G League, and he was able to be a spot player, but he just not really do much. I mean, I don't think he had any stats aside from 2 fouls in the game. Like Hadim and Boop, I thought had become a pretty reliable player at times late in the season. But like you said, like if Boskovic and Kostic are not hitting threes, like it's and those guys I think went a combined. Boskovic didn't even get a 3 up. He only played 3 minutes in the game, but Kostic was 2 of 7 from 3. As a whole, BYU was 4 of 22. Like. And it's an 8-point game. Like if they just make 2 or 3 of those more threes, it's a very, very different game. And Dybantsa was 1 of 7 as well, which is more than he usually takes. But Rob Wright didn't make a 3 in the game. Like even with Dybantsa scoring 35, like it just never felt like BYU was going to be able to do enough, especially defensively, just to kind of remain in the game. And they got out rebounded, like I said. Vukatitis was really, really good for Texas, was kind of a monster. He had 23 and 16 in the game. Just kind of exposing.
You should have had
throughout
more the free throw.
Yeah, that's true. He was 3 of 11 from the free throw line. But just in general, it just felt like this was a game that kind of exposed all of the flaws that this BYU team had, despite still having a lot of talent and just and the lack of a ceiling, like I mentioned, that they did not have as soon as Richie Saunders went out.
Yeah, and some of those flaws, the troubles inside with the size and the troubles with some of the spacing, especially with, when some of the star guys go to the bench, those were problems even when Saunders was on the floor. And then it all gets amplified when he's out of the game and you don't have that experienced presence and another guy that can go get you a basket when you really need. And that's how you end up as a first-round team that really limped to the end of the year since that injury, even though they got a couple of quality wins, but it was an ending that I think you could kind of see coming for a little while.
It's certainly one that I had seen coming for pretty much
Yeah.
since the Richie Saunders injury happened. Like they had lost. They scratch by and beat Colorado in overtime. The game Richie Saunders gets hurt right away, or like very early in the game. But after that, they go on a losing streak before beating Texas Tech to end the year. Then they get a couple of decent wins in KC, like you mentioned. But there was a point in late February where I was like, are they just going to be one and done in KC? And in the NCAA tournament, and obviously they get 2 wins in KC before losing to Houston. But this was what this BYU team was going to be without Richie Saunders. And I know some BYU fans are a little bit upset with just the season as a whole, thinking it's not a success given how good Dybantsa was and how high profile of a guy. In addition, he was similarly with Rob Wright, how much they paid him out of the portal, but. I still think the Kevin Young era and this era of BYU basketball is off to a great start. They made the Sweet 16 last year. Obviously, I think they would have been a Sweet 16 team this year if Richie Saunders was healthy. Like I do think that was certainly on the table for this group. And next year they've got a lot to look forward to. Like obviously they've got Bruce Branch III coming in. They've got another top 10 recruit. The recruiting class around him is pretty solid as well. And they've got guys coming back too. Like I think Kennard Davis Jr. could come back. Obviously Rob Wright can come back. He's only a sophomore. Kostic can come back too, like Abdullah Ahmed, the G League guy, like I mentioned. If they keep another summer in the program for him, I think would be pretty beneficial. Dominic Diamond as well, like some of these guys that only played sparingly this year. I think they'll have plenty of time to get these guys ready for bigger roles next year, where it's kind of like a similar thing. Like if you keep Rob Wright, he's going to be the headliner along with Bruce Branch, like I said. So I still think BYU is in a really good spot going forward in the Big 12. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And it sounded like Rob Wright is planning on, from what he said after the game, it sounds like Rob Wright should be back next year. So that'll be big for them. And like you said, a lot of these guys that didn't play a lot, the experience of playing a little bit this year, having an off season to grow, having another year in the rotation in a little bit bigger role, you would hope that would give them some more depth next season and allow them to be a little bit more well-rounded. Whereas even if the star power of the roster isn't going to be the same without Dybantsa and with Saunders graduating, this team is still in a great spot too. Yeah. And they should be able to hit the portal again and get some good finds there. So this team is still in a good spot to be, contending in the Big 12.
Yeah, I fully agree. All right, well, that'll wrap up the Mountain Time Zone team portion of today's episode. Before we get out of here, just want to get Troy, any of your overall general takes from the first weekend. Like you said, it was a really fun weekend. We saw teams like High Point win a game in the first round for first a little bit of an upset there. VCU obviously as well was able to win a game, but the Kentucky Santa Clara game was awesome. Obviously, Iowa beating Florida. Like anything you want to hit from the first weekend in general.
The Kentucky Santa Clara game was less awesome for Santa Clara enjoyer like myself, but
I'm fully on board with you.
No, yeah. Great game. It was a great weekend. I do think there's been so much talk about the Cinderellas, and there's no upsets, and I think High Point was the only seed 12 or lower to win a game this year. But I do think like when you get into the second round, and there's no question that stuff has changed. Like the 4 and 5 seeds are a lot better than they used to be, and the 12 and 13 seeds probably aren't quite as good.
I still think the 11 seeds are very strong. Like
the 11 seeds are very strong. Yeah.
Like I love South Florida. Obviously, Texas is in the Sweet 16 as an 11 seed. VCU won a game. I was cool to see Miami of Ohio in there as well. And even last year, like obviously see like Colorado State. Yeah, I am too. Like last year, Colorado State was a couple seconds away from making the Sweet 16 as a 12 seed. Like I still don't think like Cinderella or mid majors are dead by any means. Like it's going to get harder. It's going to be hard, but I still think you're going to see teams from the Pac-12, the new look Pac-12, and what's left of the Mountain West, and some of these other teams. Like I think maybe we'll get maybe not more, but I wouldn't be surprised to see another Miami of Ohio pop up in the next decade or so, where a team has a really, really special regular season like this, and kind of becomes the darling of the NCAA tournament, even if they only win one game and it's in Dayton.
Yes, the darling or the anti-darling if you're talking to Bruce Pearl. But
Yeah.
I do think also we're going to end up seeing a lot more teams like Texas, where a lot of these portally teams that,
Yeah.
they lose a lot of games and they're kind of, and they
It
end up
takes
being
them a
little
while to
bit
figure out, but
underseeded.
by the
Yeah.
end of the year, yeah, they're really good.
Teams that end up being a little bit underseeded based on how they're playing and their roster talent when the tournament starts. But I do think that the second round games are so good now. Like a lot of
Yeah.
these 4 and 5 and 6 seeds that get through are just such good teams and good rosters now that these are great. Like St. John's, Kansas was an amazing game. Virginia, Tennessee, we talked about, that was a great game. Like
Nebraska, Vanderbilt was awesome.
yeah, Nebraska, Vanderbilt was as good as it gets. Another feel-good story, Nebraska getting to the Sweet 16, winning their first tournament game. The crowd at that game was amazing.
Yep.
So I do think that these second round games are so good now. And then we were talking about this a little bit ago. The Sweet 16 games now are awesome. Like these games are going to be really, really good because the quality of these elite teams is just so high now that the level of basketball is so high, and this upcoming weekend is going to be great.
Yeah, with Duke, St. John's, UConn, Michigan State, like Arizona, Arkansas, obviously, Michigan, Alabama, Nebraska, Iowa is just like such an interesting Sweet 16 game. I don't think I ever would have predicted we'd get in basketball, but just an old school, like a really, really fun rivalry there. Iowa State, Tennessee is fun. Illinois, Houston. The only one, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but Purdue, Texas, the only one I'm not like super thrilled about. But even I like this Purdue or this Texas team. I do not like this Purdue
Texas
team.
is intriguing to me now.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun weekend. Like you said, high level basketball, and like the coaches are all. It's a lot of the old guard of coaches, whether it's Pitino, Izzo, Hurley, Calipari, and then you've got the new superstar coaches, whether it's Shire or Tommy Lloyd, Dusty May. Obviously, you can throw in that category as well. Nate Oates, Kelvin Sampson's here, still is Otzelberger, obviously. And then you got some of the younger. The only like surprise coach out of this group, not even a surprise because he's really risen his profile the last couple of years, but Ben McCollum quickly going from D2 star to now being 1 year at Drake success and then now knocking off the defending national champs in the second round. Like there's a lot of really, really good stories here. And obviously looking ahead, like we could get potential Arizona versus Sean Miller in the Elite Eight. We've seen so many great Duke Michigan State games in the tournament and in the past. Like I feel like that's been an Elite Eight game like 8 times in my life. You could get Houston versus one of Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Iowa State would be an awesome game. Like we've got a lot of great basketball.
You could get Hurley Pitino 4.
Yeah, that would certainly be a big storyline for the Big East to get a guaranteed Final Four team. But all right, if that's all you got, man, I appreciate you hopping on today. It's been fun talking hoops, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this tournament. I know we'll be talking off air about this as well a lot as the tournament continues here.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. Looking forward to doing it again this weekend. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Thanks again to Troy Finnegan from ClutchPoints for joining us on today's episode. Like I said at the top, or I forgot to mention at the top, but make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews over there as well. Make sure you're following the feed on YouTube as well if you prefer to watch there. Leave likes on all these videos. That helps me grow the show, and it's super appreciated by me. So thanks again to all of you for listening, and thanks again to Troy Finnegan for joining us today, and enjoy the weekend of basketball that's coming up.